Okay, so we're going to talk about the second half of Rule 4. This is starting with Rule 425, and a question I wanted to bring up real quick while Phil's jumping in is, I think we actually cover it in 425, but uh, this came up a few times in the last tournament we were in, where if a shooter goes up for a try, leaves the ground, ball never leaves his hand, the defender gets a hand on the ball never gets dislodged, and the shooter returns to the floor without ever releasing the ball. What do you got? What could you potentially have? There's a couple of options there, two or three options. What do you have on that? What does anybody have on that?
Could be a held ball or a travel.
Yeah, it's going to be a held ball or a travel if they weren't fouled, right?
Yeah.
Does anybody have a definite answer on that? And what constitutes whether or not it's a held ball or a travel?
Well, did the ball come to a pause? You felt?
What do you think?
I don't know. I'm asking you. You're describing the play because you're going to be more likely and take less shit if you come up with a jump ball than a travel.
Right.
If the guy's on top of the ball and brings him back down.
Okay.
I agree. Yeah, I think if it says that he prevents the player from throwing the ball or releasing it, then it's a jump ball, held ball.
Yeah, I mean, it does say an airborne player.
Mm-hmm.
What would make it a travel?
He never really had his hand on the ball. Either he's fouled him, like hits him in the arm and he goes up and comes down, or he just doesn't make contact and he goes up and comes down.
Okay.
It'd be a travel if he shuffles his feet before he went up for a shot.
Okay, yeah, if he shuffles his feet, that's obviously a travel. But so what would be? What about if he goes up and he prevents the player from even reaching the ball up? Like if the hand's on the ball and the player shuffles his feet while they're tussling over it. The defender doesn't gain control, he just has a hand on the ball. But the offensive player shuffles his feet while they're tussling for it.
I would say that's a travel.
Well, I may have to push back on that. I mean, if he's got his hand on the ball and it causes him to shuffle, that's technically a held ball.
Well, you have to determine that. Did it cause him to shuffle?
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, I think that's the key. Did the hand on the ball cause the travel? If so, it's a held ball.
I mean, I'm going strictly by the rule, where it talks about in Article 2 that prevents an airborne player from throwing the ball. If I got a player just with one hand on the top of, a ball or something, and the offensive player shuffles his feet, I mean, it doesn't meet Article 1, where opponents have their hands so firmly on the ball that control cannot be obtained without due roughness. It might meet that criteria, but Article 2 to me is an airborne player. So if I got my hand on a ball and the offensive player shuffles feet, I have no problem calling a travel there.
Yeah, the key is in the feet, in the pivot foot, right? What's the definition of a travel? Like a quick definition of it?
You lift your pivot foot and you put it down.
Yeah, when your pivot foot returns to the floor, right? So to have a pivot foot return to the floor, you have to establish a pivot, right? So you have to identify that there's a pivot foot. When it returns to the floor after being picked up, that's when it becomes a travel. So it has to do with that. It doesn't have anything to do with jumping necessarily, even though generally your pivot foot's going to go up if you're jumping with both feet. But I'll see a lot of times, especially in girls basketball, it'll just look weird, like they're jumping, but they're not actually jumping. Their foot doesn't actually come off the floor a lot. And so what I'm saying is, we want to be careful calling a travel there. The lesser of the two penalties is the held ball, and if we can go with that, go with it. But a travel can also be justified if you can definitely see the shuffled feet or the pivot foot returning to the floor. or if they're not able to get the ball up completely. If they just tap the ball and a person changes their mind and comes back down with both feet, you could go with the travel there as well. But I don't have a definite answer there. But the definite definition is if the pivot foot gets lifted and goes back to the ground. Phil, you there yet?
I am there yet.
Okay, let me share my screen here.
Okay, thank you.
I just pulled up the case book. You want the
Got a
case
propeller head.
book up?
I know, right? Yeah. Very hot and humid in Arkansas right now. Right. So yeah, the rule will be great.
Hey,
was-
to finish up on what we just said, the held ball, an opponent places a hand on the ball and prevents an airborne player from throwing the ball or releasing it on a try or a tap for a field goal.
It always helps when we.
Oh, you just did it.
And you guys stopped last month on 25, correct?
Well, we did. We went through 24.
Okay. Okay.
So the legal
So-
guardian position.
All right. So Errol kicked us off with section 25.
We just
Gotcha.
talked about 25. That gives us the answer there, right?
Right. Right. And I would only share, for me, wrong or right, I think game management definitely comes into play a lot of those times, because if it is borderline travel and it's against the losing team, and with that action of the ball and the hand, you can clearly sell a held ball as that discussion that we just had. That would be better to roll with the held ball. It doesn't matter if the losing team is not getting the ball. So, but the point is calling that travel. So those are the little things that I think about. So
I like
we
your
have
comment.
to have one of the two on it, right?
correct.
If-
Yep.
Okay. So,
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
Makes
Yep.
sense.
If the offensive player was going to travel, whether or not the defender touched the ball, I usually try and call a travel. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
If they're anticipating the contact and it doesn't really occur and they shuffle, then travel.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, it's only a help.
Yeah, 'cause, I mean-
prevent it.
There's been times through like last season where that scenario's happened and it's like, oh yeah, travel or held ball, and sometimes I just hesitated. So that'll clear it up.
If somebody gets
Yeah.
a quick block, they come up with the ball and they get a quick block on it, and the player has time to double pump and go back up, and they decide not to release it and come all the way
Yeah.
back down.
But yeah, that's a travel. Yeah.
I'd probably go with a travel there because the defender didn't prevent it from happening.
Right.
So
Okay. All right. So let's move into section 26 holding. This is all I would like to I like to illustrate on this is it's super important because 9 times out of 10 the holding will occur off ball, and that is one of their 1 or 2 star players that are cutting and are trying to get that open look from a 3, and if it's identified and if you already know in a pregame on who that person is, then at that point it's a good pregame. So then therefore, ideally, you will not miss a hold, meaning that we've identified that star type of player. For me, normally that center official has that best quarterback look, especially if they're not on ball or with a competitive matchup. So that's always important, I feel, to have that discussion as a crew before a game. So that's holding there. Incidental contact. All right. Thanks to the nice yellow highlighting from Errol. Okay, so the mere fact that contact occurs does not constitute a foul. You see more of that on the girls' side. And whether or not it looks like there was contact, then people think that it looks like or it should be a foul. If there's contact, there should be a foul. Well, obviously that's not the fact. So this is the incidental contact is difficult as a crew to make sure that you're kind of and you are defining the incidental contact consistently within the crew.
Hey Phil, can I interrupt you there? Can we
Yeah,
talk about,
because
airborne shooter there, like before, during, and after the shot, a foul contact before, during, and after a shot on an airborne shooter.
sure.
And
Yeah, so you're talking about Article 3 is what you're talking about?
possibly,
Which
yeah. I mean, I mean,
which one?
any of these could apply, but I'm talking,
Okay,
you know,
okay.
like sometimes we'll call a foul and they say, well, that was after the shot or something like that. And
Okay.
sometimes they have a point, sometimes they don't. Can we talk about what happens after a shot or after a blocked shot and what the difference is and what we want to let go and what we want to call and stuff like that with an airborne shooter?
Okay. The airborne shooter is basically cut and dry on the non-incidental contact, meaning that they must be able to land. So what I think, Errol, that you're kind of talking about is that the player goes up and shoots, comes down, and then almost simultaneously there is that incidental contact, we'll say, and whether or not the person, the offensive player, might like indicate that the contact caused them to fall down, so then therefore they're looking for that shot. But if the player comes down, and then if you determine right then after the player has came down legally and the defender has allowed them to come down legally, and then the contact happens, that is a non-shooting foul, just because now it just comes a common foul, non-shooting, and that's super important within the crew to identify if that is the case, because it's non-shooting, and then now we look at, is it bonus or not bonus? And then of course it would be the restart. If it's a non-bonus, then we go to the 1 to 4 spots. If we deemed it to be a foul, now again, if we're officiating the defense, there is a lot of stuff, a lot of the incidental contacts. It's hard to miss those if you're officiating the defense, just because did that defender with that contact? Well, first of all, who initiated the contact? That's always my first question. Who initiated the contact? At that point, if I'm officiating the defense, I'm going to know if the offense initiated that. If the defensive player initiated, then at that point, is that defined as incidental contact, and or did it really affect the shot, or
Okay.
all that stuff? So
Good.
anyway,
I've got
Let me
one.
ask
Can
this
I
to the
share an
group.
example? Can I
Yeah.
share an example of one that happened in the last tournament here?
Heck yeah, go
Sure.
for it.
So Bill Criddle had a call, and he was trail, and the player was shooting a 3. The defender went up, blocked. I mean, had hand on the ball, blocked the shot, but in the same motion came down and hit the shooter in the face with his hand.
That's exactly what I wanted to
Ball
get
had
into.
released. Yeah, ball had released after the block, and then hand, because of momentum, hits his face. Is that a foul?
100%.
Absolutely. Yep.
So guys, I think where we're talking incidental contact is generally going to happen off ball. And that'd be two players that just are running. And generally they're running at the same speed and they just run into each other. That's incidental contact. Generally, when it has and pertains to the ball, sometimes, but normally it's either going to be a foul or a no call. It's not going to be deemed as incidental contact.
Yeah.
Yep.
The part on the reason I ask about the airborne shooter thing, obviously, if he gets hit in the face or the head, especially on an airborne shooter, you're going to call that, because any contact on an airborne shooter technically is a foul. Any contact, not just incidental contact. So what changes a little bit is if there's a block on the shot. Usually, if there's contact on that same hand or wrist or something, and their hand is over the ball, generally, after the block shot, a lot of that contact coming down after the shot is released and the shot's been blocked is considered incidental on the way down. So that's something we want to be careful of. If the guy comes from nowhere, nails the ball, hits the ball so hard, and a little bit of his follow through kind of brushes against the guy's arm or the guy's body as he goes up, as long as that defender was in legal guarding position, and it brushes by, then that contact after a block shot oftentimes can be called incidental.
And does not hinder, like you have there.
Yeah, there's the key there. It can't.
Yep, does not hinder.
Right.
Yep. So
that's about the only exception to the airborne shooter rule. So anyway.
But we gotta be careful, specifically high school. When an airborne shooter goes up for a layup and it's all clean, and as he's coming down, there's body contact that sends him into the wall. That's not incidental.
Right.
that is
Even though
not
he got
incidental.
a clean block, that's not incidental.
But
Again, that's at the high school level. Now, maybe at the college level, but we're not talking about that. I mean, at this last camp was great stuff. When you watch the block and the hand of the block is above the ball, generally it's a clean block. If it's below, it's a foul.
Yep.
That's good.
Yeah, that was
I didn't
really
know.
good insight.
Yeah, it's really good.
All right. And then there in Article 4, it talks a little about the screener. Let me see here. Yeah, so visual field, keyword there, visual field. And by stopping or going around the screener, again, if they go around the screener, and if the screener kind of like maybe extends the body frame, but then still goes around it, it's obviously tough to call the illegal screen because there's really no contact. But then again, back to what we're talking about here with the incidental contact, if it's just a little brush around and the screener is legal and you're watching that defender to see, does it hinder them? That is the entire key part that we're getting out of section 27. Does it hinder either the offense or the defensive player? So
yeah, we could spend a ton of time on that one.
Yeah, we can. All right.
What's some phraseology for in the post? Because we officiate an airborne shooter a little bit differently than a screener, and we officiate a post player a little bit differently than we do a perimeter player. Anybody have any comments on that or insight on the difference between officiating on the perimeter versus officiating on the post?
Let's ask Jonathan Rose. Jonathan.
Johnny Rose, where you at? He's on mute. You got to unmute yourself, John. And we got Brandon Hill here too.
What's that?
Jonathan,
go ahead and ask, Errol.
Did you hear the question, John?
I didn't, sorry.
The question is, what insight can you give on the difference between incidental contact on a perimeter player, incidental contact on a post player?
I think that there is a very much higher likelihood of the incidental contact being on the post player than on the perimeter player. I think, you know, in the tight confines and just by the virtue of the job that they're trying to do underneath, that there is much more of a likelihood that that incidental contact, you know, that you're going to run into having people run into each other in the post, whereas out on the perimeter, incidental contact I think would be less likely than underneath. That out on the perimeter, that contact more often than not isn't going to be because somebody else bumped you and like you said, you know, you incidentally hit another player or whatever. If there's contact out on the perimeter, usually or generally it's because the offensive guy beats you and you're trying to, you know, get back into position, and that's where the hindering comes in. It's much more easy to see the hinder or the change in direction of a shot or whatever out on the perimeter than it is in the post.
That's good stuff, Jonathan.
Yeah, I like that.
Any other quick thoughts on that topic? Because I got one thing to share on it, but any other thoughts on that? What are you looking for? When does incidental contact in the post become a foul? What's the difference?
Yeah, probably
When-
displacement.
Mike Ryan?
Advantage.
Go ahead, Sam.
I didn't hear you again. Mike, you still there?
Yeah, somebody else comment. I mean, for me, you know, if there's equal pressure on the defender and the offensive player in the post,
Yeah.
you know, but if there's obvious displacement one way or the other.
Good. Yeah, that equal pressure is the big thing. They might look like they're pushing the heck out of each other, which is kind of okay, or it's a lot more liberal in the key, right? There's not as much freedom of movement down there in the key because that's just the nature of the game. And so there has to be equal pressure there. If there's not equal pressure, often somebody gets displaced or is fouled or held or kicked or whatever. And so we're looking for that equal pressure. Try and let it go if you can. But if a foul needs to be called to make the game better, then you call the foul.
George Turney used to play in the post. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I like the big guys. Yeah. No.
What do you look for in the post?
Oh, as far as rebounders go,
No, incidental contact, foul or no foul.
to me, it's hard to call a foul when you got two guys going for the rebound and their arms are locked up and they're pushing. It's, to me, there's equal pressure. I don't know how you could say, well, one's pushing a little harder than the other. So incidental contact to me would be hard right under the basket. Out in the
Alright, good
perimeter,
stuff.
it's easy. Under the
Good
basket,
stuff.
you got 4 or 5 players going for the ball all at the same time. I don't know.
That's good.
Yeah, good, George.
Zachariah Nicholas, get ready. You're going to answer something pretty soon too.
Ari chimed in a couple times, and I said you're looking to see if there's an advantage.
I haven't heard you yet, but we're moving to the next one.
All right. Jump ball, basically, like how Errol is doing it in the yellow. The jump ball begins when the ball leaves the official's hands, and it ends when it's touched. It is that simple.
All right,
Well,
here's the question for Zachariah Nicholas. When would you call back a poor toss? And the reason I'm asking that, because me personally, it's got to be really, really bad, because bottom line, whoever gets it the first time, the next one, the other team gets. But Zachariah, when would you call back a toss?
Neil, I'm just going to go with the easy answer and say no one touches it.
Oh, that's good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I
Oh,
mean,
there you go. That is an easy
yeah,
one.
yeah, too, it's like if there's an obvious advantage, right? If it goes up to like one side and it's on that side, then you're gonna have to call it. But it's one of those things where you're using your judgment on it, but you also don't want to probably override your partner. But you want to get the obvious ones.
Oh, good.
Well, if they don't touch the ball in the jump, you're gonna whistle. You're not
Yeah,
overriding.
that's obvious. Yeah, that's an
Yeah.
obvious one. But I mean, like if it gets skewed to one side, I mean,
Well, and really, it wasn't about the toss. If they didn't touch it, it could have been the toss was fine. It was just the players couldn't figure it out.
yeah.
Did you see the I think it was the game last night, the NBA game where they called a foul during that jump ball?
Oh no, really?
Hmm.
On the jumpers or on like a
Yeah, on
On
one of the
ball.
jumpers, basically, the one
Pushed
jumper
him?
got a lot higher, and the other
Yeah.
one basically, got him on the arm,
Oh.
out of the way, and they called a foul on that play.
So and then is it just I guess you're just going to a reset then, like it's just a common foul?
Yeah.
So, Mike,
right.
let me ask you this. I actually like that call. You didn't?
Oh, I'd never seen it before. It was kind of
I
interesting.
have not. The reason I liked it is because
Yeah.
the other team got the ball and that guy went right across his wrist and he wasn't able to get the ball, even though he probably wouldn't have.
Yeah. Yep.
Two of those guys that were on that game last night have now worked 2 of the games in the championship.
Oh wow.
Nice. All right, let's move to kicking the ball. And Brandon Hill, I have some questions or a question for you. I'll just have a question for you. Have you ever experienced? Have you thought about maybe from yourself and or one of your crew members on a game has ever called a kicked ball violation when it hit the knee intentionally? Intentionally, the defender tried to stop a pass and it hit the knee, not the thigh, right on the knee.
You're talking, Brandon. You're on mute.
Brandon Hill, you're talking about?
Brandon Hill.
Give
Yes.
us the wait signal. I think he's trying to unmute.
He's
Brandon,
got,
you're still on mute.
he's closing a deal right now in business. So
Beautiful.
I could be the other Brandon and answer
Brandon
that.
Hill, you're still
All
on
right.
mute.
He's muting his TV right now.
Oh, he was watching a movie. Now he's
All right, Jonathan, all yours.
I think that I've never had it happen, but the knee's considered part of the leg. So yeah, if you deem it intentional, it should be called.
Okay. So is the thigh a part of the leg?
Yes. I mean, if you're hip checking that ball
Bones
intentionally,
connected to the whatever.
Gotcha. All right.
Favorite part
Okay.
of the leg.
what about your glutes?
Yeah, glute to be
I
probably.
think
probably
that's the
above.
gray area,
Yeah.
Brandon.
That's the
You're
great area.
always
All right.
intentionally hitting things with your glutes.
Hey, if the offensive team, like A1, has the ball for a throw in and they roll it to A2 who's on the floor, and that person basically stops the ball by putting their foot on top of it, then bends over and picks up the ball, is that a violation?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anyone disagree?
Doesn't say you have
Intentional is your golden word on that.
So it
Yeah.
doesn't matter
You're
whether it's
calling it
defense or
kicking
offense.
violation, intentional.
It doesn't matter how hard you hit it either.
Correct.
It doesn't say strike with force or whatever. It just says striking it. So any kind of contact that's intentional with the leg or the foot would fall under this rule.
Yeah, the spirit of that law, I'm sure the spirit of that rule came from, we don't want people to manipulate the ball in any way with their legs.
Yeah, and remembering too, if there's a pass that's intentionally thrown at the leg and the leg was not intentionally lifted, it's not a kickball.
Right.
It's a
Right.
play on. And that sometimes gets called, and it's unfortunate.
It sometimes gets called from partners that are 2 areas away from yours too, on your line, but
Yeah.
That's usually when
big
it,
one.
well, that's when it usually happens is they're watching the ball and out of the peripheral, they think it's a kickball.
yeah.
I will tell you guys a rule of thumb, and I think I screwed this call up. Wasn't it with you, Brandon? Where a player jumped and it struck his leg, and I didn't call it, and somebody way across called it. Was that with you, Brandon?
I don't remember that.
But it doesn't matter. And I kind of, then I watched it on film, and I saw that as he jumped, yes, he did move his leg a little bit. So my changing of the whole story now, if you're jump and your foot's not on the ground, it's a kick ball. But I'll give you a funny story. I was at Washougal. I don't know how many of you guys remember, this a long time ago, the Washougal coach that I used to call Eeyore. He was always thought he's got screwed. You guys remember this is probably 10, 15 years ago. My partner, the ball, because again, we got to remember if the foot's on the ground, just goes off the leg, it's not a kick ball. So I saw that because I'm a ball watcher. I saw the ball go off this guy's leg and he didn't move it. And my partner called a kick ball and they lost the ball. And the Washougal coach goes, ape shit. And then I told my partner, I said, are you sure? He goes, yeah, Neil, he lifted his foot and all that. He goes that. So we get the film. And sure enough, he didn't lift his foot. Guess what my partner said? He goes, Neil, I had a different film. I had a different angle.
I guess you can find it anywhere you want. Yeah.
The point I'm making on this is we want to make sure we get it right. If the foot does not move, come off the floor, it's probably not a kick.
Hey, is my mic working?
Yep.
I had to go into settings. Sorry, I heard your question, Phil. I have not called anything when it hits somebody's knee, nor has my partner. So
I don't recognize your voice. Who is this?
it's Brandon Hill.
Your name was there. Now you're just an iPhone.
Hang on, let me fix.
Neil is so confused right now.
Well, your name was here. Now you're an iPhone.
Had to go into settings and change a bunch of stuff. So give me a second.
Okay, well, hey, at least you're back with us. That's awesome. Well, you never left, but at least now we can hear you. So awesome. So again, Brandon, you said, Brendan Hill, you said no, you have not ever called a kickball when it hit the knee, or you never have seen one on a game that you've been with.
No, not on. No.
Okay.
I mean, for me on that call, it's just obvious that they stuck their foot out, right, to try and.
Right.
It's usually on a pass. That's when I've called it.
Or leg. Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, exactly.
And a reminder
Beautiful.
that's typically a shot clock reset.
Yep. Yep, it is. All right. So multiple throw. It says a multiple throw is a succession of free throws attempted by the same team. Okay.
Yep.
That's a tough one to
And they put
understand.
that in there.
Everybody
You
memorize
know
that
that.
one.
It's like,
Jeez.
okay.
It's a big one.
All right. All right. Let's go into some more stuff that we might not be very familiar with, and that is a pass. Okay. A penalty. I mean, dude, a pass is a pass. All right. So,
Skip to 33. Skip to 33.
yeah, thank you. I was gonna go penalties.
Well,
Good.
the
All
only
right.
thing I had on pass is the definition of a bat.
Yeah.
So I guess you can swing with your arms and
Yeah.
like a
Yeah.
bat
Or a roll. I mean, it's going, yep.
or
Yep.
yeah.
Your hand
Okay.
has to be open though.
Okay.
Real. You can't.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
can't
sure.
punch-
I mean, yeah.
Can't
I
punch
mean,
a
like, that
ball.
makes sense.
You can't punch a ball with a closed fist.
All right, so pivot takes place when the player who is holding the ball steps once, or more than once, in any direction with the same foot, while the other foot, called the pivot foot, is kept at its point of contact with the floor. So I'll go back to you, Brandon Hill. When it comes to you and your, give us some examples that goes through your mind on processing, okay, they've established their pivot foot.
So like when they first, I guess, set their feet, did they go right, left, right, or did they land at the same time? Right. So
Okay.
I
Yep.
I know their
Yep.
pivot foot. If they land at the same time, then I got to wait for them to establish their pivot foot.
Outstanding. Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's pretty much what I'm looking at.
Yeah, that is it, dude. That's basically it. And whenever a player jumps and grabs the ball in the air and comes down, both feet simultaneous, you just have to wait and you have to look at that pivot. It could be pretty quick. They could pivot left and then all of a sudden change pivot feet and pivot right and kind of maybe take that one dribble and go for a layup or something. I don't know, right? So, but yeah, that is the initial thought process, at least for me. Exactly what you do there, Brandon, is basically have that established left or right in my mind, and when that action happens. So, all right. So,
The pivot foot, that the hardest part, I think, is if they're dribbling the ball, you got to determine when do they start gathering the ball. That's when you have
okay,
to
yep,
start
okay,
start with the pivot foot.
yep,
They're dribbling, and when do they start to gather the ball? That's a
yep,
judgment, because then that's when you have to figure out when do they establish the pivot foot.
yeah.
That's the hardest
Yeah.
part for me.
And we've all officiated a lot, and we can kind of see how that flow of that gathering is as they're going up for a layup or whatever that action is. You can kind of tell with kind of how George is illustrating is
Well,
basically.
and I think the key word in there is, or phrase is, who's holding the ball steps. So we're giving, the player has a hold of the ball and then begins his step. So on
Yeah,
a gather, right, they dribble, hold the ball, then they establish that pivot.
yep. And holding can definitely be defined as gathering. Yes. Yep.
You just won't see
Because
gathering in the high school rule book.
but you will not.
Holding the ball, I guess, is the same. Would we say that's the same as gathering?
Kinda, yeah.
It's more, well, I mean, yeah, it's believable, but I wouldn't say
Yeah.
holding. I would go gathering, but all right, cool. All right. Thanks, Brandon, and thanks, Brandon and Brandon, and thanks, George. All right, moving to 34, bench personnel, substitutes, and team. So, all right, so this is kind of one of my favorite ones to a point, is that in my games, I have an emphasis, and I'm sure I missed it a couple times in games, but I have an emphasis on during timeouts. Let's not lose focus. Let's be professional and hit our spots. Maybe on that first timeout, come together. But understand that we must follow the rules when it comes to the timing on when substitutes can come into the game and when they cannot. So, Mike Ryan, can you discuss that a little bit with us on the timing on when a substitute can come into the game? Well, what's required first for them to come into the game, and then second, when can they not come into a game?
Well, someone who's a bench personnel who wants to be a player needs to report
Yep.
to the table.
Okay.
Once they're beckoned.
Okay, beckon. Keyword, perfect.
By the official.
And how about during timeouts? When can they not come into the game?
If there's a bench personnel after the 15-second horn, they're not allowed to. I mean, they can report, but they're not allowed to come on the court at that point until the next situation where it's dead ball and they're allowed to come on.
Okay, nice. So, question: can a coach, after recognizing that they made a mistake and they really want that player to come in, can they call a timeout for the person to enter the game?
I don't get that question.
So they've gone past the 15-second mark, they report.
Right. So we'll say it's a 30-second timeout after the 15-second horn is buzzed. Coach sends a player there, understanding that he or she really wants that player to be in the game. Can they call a timeout to get that person into the game?
And they buy him in with a timeout, is what you're saying.
My understanding is no, they cannot do that. My understanding is they still have to wait for a live ball and a dead ball situation.
I would think just the opposite. You send the player back to the bench and then you send him back up there prior to the 15-second.
I think you can. I think the timeout does allow him.
Would that change under the new rule? Because if it's a timeout now, everyone's bench personnel.
Yeah,
right?
resets, so to speak. The timeout resets it, so he can come back and beat the second horn to get in.
Right, I believe he can come in on that.
Yeah.
And Article 1, 434.1, that's changed this year. So there's a change to it, and it says all players in the game will be considered bench personnel once an official signals for a timeout. So there's not a difference in a timeout between members legally on the court because everyone's considered bench personnel at that point.
Yeah, good point.
But
So you
that's
should
right. Don't they still
anyway.
have to report prior to the 15-second mark?
Right,
If they
but
wanna
in
come
this
in?
scenario, right, but in this scenario, he should be able to call another timeout.
Yeah, okay, I see. Yeah, I believe you can take a timeout to put that player in.
But that's only because of the new rule change.
Well, but before the rule change, it was still, they could call a timeout and a reset.
Yeah, and this is a case play that we don't know about. You're going to establish a new 15-second warning horn if a timeout is called.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And a team can call back-to-back timeouts?
Yep.
Okay. All right.
They can use all their timeouts at one time. They can use 5.
Yep. Okay.
Never seen it yet, but
I know, like I haven't either. So, all right. So I wanted to throw that little tidbit in there. All right. So let's go to 34 here. Players 1 to 5 members who legally on the court. Okay.
while you're reading
Bench
through it, Phil,
personnel,
let me
yep.
ask a question. Let me ask a question, you guys.
Okay.
Why does it matter whether a player is a player or bench personnel, and when do they become one or the other? It's outlined here, but why does it matter, and when does it happen?
Well, it matters based upon their conduct.
I think it impacts,
It
impacts
matters
technical
for
fouls.
consistent
Well-
enforcement of penalties for unsporting conduct by allowing officials to issue technical fouls to bench personnel during timeouts.
Well, hold on. So he's asking the definition of each. So the player becomes bench personnel after the substitute has come on to become the player.
Well, there's
So
two
that-
things. Two things. It's an either or. It's when that what Brandon just said, or when the coach is notified.
This player's disqualification, yeah.
Yes. Yep. Yep. When you tell a coach, hey, that's 5-on-0, now they become bench person.
Well, if a player is bench personnel and you have to do a whack him, it goes against the coach. If he's on
Correct.
the court, it does go against the coach.
Yeah. Which we had last playoffs.
Yeah, so that is different, right? Because I think there was a case play, you know, if a player who was a player goes on a timeout, they come back on the court and say something to the official.
Yeah.
It used to be like a direct technical foul to that person that they're not
Yeah,
bench
now it's a
personnel, but it
bench.
sounds like with that change this year,
That will
Yeah,
change.
and that's a bench.
Yeah,
bench
that will change this year.
technical. Yeah.
This whole section is going to change this year. This that's up on the screen. Well, not
Yeah.
the whole
34.
section, but yeah, it's now. I mean, they became on intermissions. They were, bench personnel, but now it's for all timeouts, and it starts right when the timeout is signaled or acknowledged by the official. So that's kind of an
Gotcha.
interesting change. It makes
So
it
you call a
Yeah.
timeout, it yells at you, then it's a bench tee.
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which hurts the coach.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. I think anything else within 34? All right, moving right along to player location and status. Well, more status. So an example would be.
Oh, sorry, Phil. I do have one
Yeah.
question on that Article 4. So if you got an injured player who is not in uniform, but is causing a disruption or constitutes technical, he is not really defined as a bench personnel.
We consider him bench personnel because he's on the bench.
But it says who is in uniform and is eligible to become a player.
Yeah, but that would be substitutes, coaches,
Right.
managers, statisticians. He'd fit in one of those categories. Basically,
Yeah.
anybody that's on the
All
bench.
individuals who are affiliated with the team, including but not limited to those people. These bench
Yeah.
personnel because they're affiliated with the team and he's on the bench.
Yep.
Gotcha. Article 2 defines it. Okay, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Does that include?
All right. So
include
that next
kids?
Article 35, status. This comes into play whenever you have a block charge. And the defender, because you're officiating the defense, the defender has a foot on the line of an out of bounds, either a sideline or end line. And that would indicate what their status is. And that's why you would call a block, even though it was clearly a charge.
Yep.
That would be an example. And I think, was it last year was the new rule, or maybe a couple of years? I know back in the day, whenever you intentionally went out of bounds and came back in, I believe it was a technical foul. Now, basically, if you go intentionally out, and if you're the first one to touch it on an inbounds, that is a violation and not a technical foul. It's a violation. it's illegal. It is illegal touching is what the violation. I believe.
But they have to intentionally run out of bounds.
Correct. Yep.
Not just their momentum.
Right. Yep. Intentionally. And guys, kind of some stuff that I think about just in regular basketball play to a point. Violations and penalties are, or we'll say common fouls, are deemed because it's an advantage for. It is a disadvantage to the offensive player. That's pretty much kind of like if some new rule comes into play, it's because someone gotten smart and it's a disadvantage to the offensive player. It could be maybe disadvantage to like the defensive player, but normally it's the offensive player because of just them not be able to score and or maybe a free run movement or something. So anyway, that's just kind of what I could go into the common sense world. So all right. So the status. The 3 factors of Article 1 is the same as such. Last contact with the floor, extension of the floor. Yeah, so the extension of the floor, that's kind of what Neil was talking about, right? They go up a layup and or it was clearly blocked, and now they're now out of bounds, but still airborne, and then they just get hammered to the wall. That would be an extension piece. Does anybody have any other examples that they would like to share that the status came into the decision making of the call that you made or not?
Hey guys, I have something. I see this a fair amount, and it's specifically on a jump ball where we have 2 players, and one player is actually laying out of bounds, and the other one is inbounds, and they both have a held ball, and we have officials coming in with a held ball call.
It is not
Aaron,
correct.
is that the correct call on that play?
Sorry.
It's only correct if you let it go, but no, it's not the correct call.
I'm asking Aaron.
I thought you said Errol.
Aaron.
No, come on, Aaron. Aaron, you're
Aaron's
there.
on mute. He's probably flying somewhere.
Only in Utah would they call that a held ball. And
I've seen it, and I actually have been on the floor where my partner has made that call, and I go down later on, and I said, did you think that one of the 2 players were out of bounds? He goes, I didn't notice. The point I'm making on this is you want to make sure you see the whole situation, find out where the position of both players are on the held ball.
I think Aaron's back. I think we got Aaron back.
Aaron, what's the call?
I am here. I agree with I agree with Phil.
Phil, it's Neil. From Utah.
it's Phil Anderson.
I'm sorry. Look, it's 6
I am
a.m.
his
here.
mentor, but I'm not Phil.
I'm sorry. It's 6 a.m. here. I'm so tired, but I didn't want to miss this. So
where is here?
Aaron, Utah's
Where
far
are you?
away.
I'm in Djibouti, North Africa. We flew in some military stuff. We got in about 8 hours ago. So
Wow, that's
Everybody
impressive
has
that you're
to
even
brag.
no, that's Djibouti is not bragging. If you've ever been here, it is not bragging. No, but I learned so much in these phone calls. I didn't want to miss it. But no, I agree with you, Neil.
Hey, Aaron,
Thank
I
you for
gave your
joining
brother
us.
your check, and he'll probably never get it to you.
Thanks for letting me know. I will get it out of him one way or another, and I'll report back to you.
All right.
Was I was watching some games this week in some tournaments my daughter was playing in, and that exact scenario happened. But the player that was a held ball, but the player just had like barely their foot out of bounds, and they were both on the floor. And so in my head, I was thinking jump ball, and the official called out of bounds, and I was like, nice catch, because it was just their toe was on the out of bounds line. So they called.
Brandon, that's great officiating.
You
Yeah,
should
it was.
recruit that official, Brandon.
Okay.
Go get him.
I think
Yeah.
she was already with
Again, what I'm pointing out is sometimes on a jump ball, we zero in so quickly on the two players that we don't focus wide and see where the players are prior and during the jump ball.
Yeah.
All right.
This
Yes.
this is Aaron again.
Exactly.
I guess that's one reason that if you get those players down on the floor, another reason to close down as soon as you can from your position is to see not only to intervene if you need to, but also to get a look at where those feet are. I guess another reason for close down.
But again, the reason I bring this up, about 9 years ago, bit me in the ass. I went with a jump ball. And it was kind of a big game. This coach comes to me and says, well, Neil, wasn't he out of bounds? I'm thinking, shit, yeah, he was, but I couldn't change my call. So you learn by your screw ups.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Aaron. And thank you, everyone. All right, let's move on to the point of interruption. The point of interruption. So normally whenever we have a whistle, that's the interruption, normally. And the calling official of the interruption should let us know several things. Of course, the restart would be great. That way, then when they're going to report whatever they need to report, then the other two definitely knows which new position they're going to be at, if applicable, and they can get the restart going on that point of interruption. So in section 36 here, it talks about the 4 designations of the restarts. But first of all, let me see here. The inadvertent whistle, an interrupted game, a correctable error, a double. Can someone give an example of a correctable error that they have done? Has anyone done a correctable error and when the crew and or you or whomever administered the correctable error, could you please let us know what the restart was or what determined that point of interruption? Anyone? Correctable error, point of interruption. Could be an inadvertent whistle, right? Could be an inadvertent whistle. Maybe you're out of shape and you're running too hard and you had to blow the whistle because you're breathing.
Phil, you remember our last game at Prairie last year? Towards the end there, with they have that funky shot clock that just stays at 30 if it's under 30 seconds.
Right. Yes, it's so dumb. So dumb.
It wasn't you or me, it was our partner. We'll throw him under the bus. Where we talked about it in pregame and
even talked about it. Yep.
Yeah, and it came up, he blew his whistle. He's like, the shot clock's not working. He's like, ah, crap. It's working just fine. It's just under 30 seconds. And so it was an inadvertent whistle. Ball was out there on the perimeter, so he reset it right there at the 28-foot line on the sideline next to the score table.
Yep, that was the closest spot of the 4 spots because we were definitely in the front court. Yep.
The 4 spots are gonna remain the same, but where the ball is going to change a little bit this year. Of course, if it occurs inside the 3-point line, we're going to take it out on the end line. If it's outside of that, it's going to be on the sidelines this year.
Yeah, one more trapezoid.
Oh, okay, okay. So the 3-point line is now either in or out, right? So if
Yeah.
it's inside that arc, then it's
And
the end line, and then either side, on the sideline if it's outside of the arc.
Right.
yeah,
Well, that's easy.
Yeah. So there's no
Beautiful.
more imaginary lines on where we can down.
Yeah, that line goes from the free throw line to
So
the
Greg, we
corner.
should have even less of a reason to get this wrong. This is a pretty big sticking point that when you want to advance is to get the correct inbounding spot and
Yeah.
stick with it.
matter.
You
It
point
matters.
to it. If you point to
Game.
the 28-foot line and your partner
It
takes it
does.
out on the end line, blow your whistle and be like, "Hey, no partner, it's over here on the 28-foot line in a varsity game."
Well, with that new rule, now it's easier to convince my partners that in that half moon, right? In that half
Yeah.
moon, it should be restarted on the end line, right? As of last year, if it was in that half moon, that was part of the trapezoid, if you want to say, right? But
Yeah.
now it's easier to actually convince or define, hey, it's inside the 3-point line. So yes, let's go to the end line.
Should be
So
easier. We'll see.
yeah.
Yeah.
And Zachariah is absolutely correct. If we put the ball in wrong, it might be an advantage or disadvantage. It matters where that ball is inbounded at.
Drawing up a play or something, you never know.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
or have a play.
So, yep.
Hey Phil, let's be selective in what we cover. We've got
Okay.
about four
Yeah.
and a half more pages to go.
Okay.
Let's cover whatever we can in the next 20 minutes and shut it down here.
Okay, all right. So we're all good on the designated spots. The point of interruption, technical fouls, it's at half court, right? The double
rebounding.
technical, yeah, let's just go choose straight rebound. All right, so rebounding, in the Article 2, it basically defines what a player may not do, basically. And that is, and this is offense or defense. It doesn't say defense, it just, this is a player. So remember the disadvantage and advantage. Displace, charge, or push an opponent. 9, can someone tell us when it comes to rebounding, what are the two main of a 3-person crew? What 2 positions are the primary enforcers of rebounding?
Center and lead.
Okay, and the trail is not why.
Oh, he's taken off to go to the other end by himself.
On the shot?
Yeah.
Good
As soon as
point.
shot
That
takes
could be
off, yeah, he's taken off.
applicable. Yep. I always define as the 2 positions that are the enforcers on the rebounders is the person who doesn't have the person who is on ball is not the enforcer. Because they have to stay with the shot, stay with the shooter, right? So then now that leaves the other 2, right? So that's kind of my basic rule when I'm out there, and what are my roles when it comes to rebounding in what position that I'm in. So, all right.
The rebounder.
What's that?
So if you don't have the shooter, you have the rebounder sort of mindset.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. All right. So extend elbows, extend shoulders, hips, knees.
Arms.
There you go. Yeah.
I don't know why coaches teach them to put their arms backwards to hold the defenders.
Right.
That's a foul.
And it's so obvious.
Yeah.
You're You are hindering. You are hindering. Oh my gosh. All right. Anybody have anything else to go over on rebounding? All right. We're moving along
Skip to
we
number
have
40 here.
40. Rules a rule. 40 is a screen. Establish a legal screening position. May face in any direction. Oh my gosh, how many people did not know that? The screener may face any direction. Time and distance are relevant. Just because you're facing the person that you're screening, that doesn't mean the person sees you. And time and distance is definitely applicable. All right. Okay. Normally, so I mean, shoot, there's no post hardly ever in high school games anymore, it seems. So screening is becoming more and more and more and more important to actually to officiate and to make sure that we catch those that are relevant to an illegal screen. But this is going over what legal screening position actually means. So
Hey,
we
Phil,
always, yeah,
go over C. The screener
see,
shall be stationary, except when both the
except,
screener and opponent are moving in the same path in the same direction. So if I'm screening you and you try to go around, I can just keep following you. You're the defender. And I'm going to screen you so my player can shoot. I can't just follow you around, can I? Or shoot to change directions.
well, that would be tough because I would think the same path would not be applicable. Because if I'm trying to get around and I guess if you stay in front of me, I guess that would be okay, but that normally is not applicable. It doesn't work out that way. Um, so with that example, George,
Wouldn't you have a moving screen?
correct, on, except when both the screener and the opponent are moving in the same path and the same direction.
I think this happens a lot when the player is bringing the ball up the floor. If there's, usually the guy that's going to set the screen for the ball handler and there's a defender, but yet they're both going to the front court together. He doesn't have to be stationary for him to be in between him and the ball handler. I think that's kind of what I'm visualizing.
And the screener could be kind of like backing up, right, as they're coming up the floor. Like you see a lot of this in the NBA.
Yeah, I was just going to NBA.
Yep, like you see a lot of that example there, George, in the NBA, where the where A2 is basically backing up, and then B1 is basically moving in that same direction and the same path. So sooner or later, B1's going to go around A2, but that's just the example that I would. So that's a good point out, because yeah, that can be confusing. So so the vertical plane, the shoulder width apart, that's what we use on defining on someone extending their frame for an illegal screen. So that's where we get that terminology from when it comes to an illegal screen. Anything else here that is
Hey guys, I have something. So screening is something, don't put a lot of thought into it. Just call the obvious stuff. This is one situation where I use the term advantage, disadvantage. Meaning, if I see off ball illegal screen and that player that got illegal screen 4 has no play in the on anything, I'm not going to call it. I'm going to call when an illegal screen gains an advantage for a team.
Yeah, that's a good point, Neil. That's like a sweep to the left in football, and there's holding on the right-hand side, as in, we'll say the tackle out there holding something. It's not even at the point of origin or the point of attack. So, yep. All right. Anything else on screens?
This Article 6 answers George's question. The player behind is responsible. So you can't be following somebody and then make illegal contact because the person behind has a responsibility.
No, I'm not talking about making contact. I'm just saying, if you go, I want to screen for you, and so I want to get between you and a defender. If your defender tries to go around me, if I just keep following him, you're saying that's legal?
Following is not in the same path. So anyway.
Yeah. All right. Section 41 on shooting, try, or tap. Those 3 are definitely important to know, because if we're at the .3 or less, it has to be a tap. It can't be a catch and shoot. And a try is basically a shooting, I guess, motion, or to put the ball into the basket. Begins the motion, yep. And then therefore that would, with that definition, then you would know on a common foul if it's shooting or not. And discuss when the try ends. Okay. Yeah. The throw-in and thrower here. So the designated spot. People ask, so
Hey,
how
Phil,
much?
hold on one second.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the other one. Kind of a general rule. And some of us don't do a really good job on a try for goal, because a lot of times we have somebody that's going to the basket and you can see it says begin your motion. And a lot of times they get fouled and we say no on the ground. And when you do that, you basically reward bad defense. So really key on when that person is beginning his motion of shooting. Anyway, that's all I have to say.
Okay. Thanks, Neil. All right. And again, yeah, I don't think you'll see gathering anywhere here, but the motion is the key thing. It's the intent. All right. All right. So the throw-in ends. Okay. So the throw-in and thrower, the designated spot. What was I going to talk about in that?
When does the throw-in start and stop? When does the throw-in begin and stop?
Right. So, all right. So I have 2 comments, and people can come in to maybe say either I'm wrong or add another one. I have the throw-in would start is, for me, is when the ball is at the team's disposal, meaning made try, balls laying there, rolling around on the end line. That's something that I think about, right? And then of course, second, the no-brainer is on a throw-in is when I hand them the ball or when I bounce them the ball. So, all right. So yes, Article 3, there it is at the disposal. Nice.
When does the 5 second count end?
When does the 5 second count end? So is that when you're saying 6?
That's one.
Let's ask Zachary.
It'll
Oh my God,
When
Zachariah.
does the 5 second count
Oh my God.
end?
When the ball's released from the thrower's hand.
Atta buddy.
Okay, thank you.
It's Article 4.
Okay, okay. All right.
Okay, when does the throw-in end?
When touched, or like when I learned at camp, it goes out of bounds. Yeah. All right. Yes. Oh yeah. Yep. When and or a violation is done by the team that is throwing in. Yep. The throwing team commits a violation. All right.
A question on that: if Team A has the ball for a throw-in after a held ball or an alternating possession, so it's their ball, and Team A goes to throw it in, and his teammate A1 throws it, A2 kicks the ball, so there's a violation there. Number one, whose ball is it? Number two, who gets the possession arrow?
So you kind of set it there, but let's ask, see, let's check to see who's on.
Let's ask Brandon or Aaron if they can unmute.
Brandon Hill or Aaron, either one of you.
Ask Djibouti. Brandon, you got it?
Yeah. So, well, okay. So they're passing it in. We just had a held ball. He's
Yep.
throwing it in, and the defender sticks out their leg and kicks it.
The offensive player.
Teammate.
His teammate kicks it.
Yep.
A2 kicks it intentionally. Intentionally kicks the ball.
Well, I think the alternating arrow stays the same, and it's just turnover to the other team. But I don't know.
That is correct. Yeah.
That is correct. You do not change the arrow if A violates on a throw-in.
Are you sure on that?
100%.
100%. 125%.
Yeah. In the rule book, there's a provision that says that it doesn't change when the offensive team violates. So the alternating possession arrow doesn't change if the throwing team or offensive team violates.
Woohoo!
That's a tricky one sometimes.
It is.
But
All right.
Sharp dude.
43 you have timeouts. We already talked about timeouts.
I heard they're doubling the amount of timeouts next year to 10.
No, they can't.
Each team gets 10. Okay,
They can't, dude. They can't. No. No, they can't. That would be bad because kids would miss more school. All right.
Let's learn about
Traveling. Shoot. Okay. All right. So traveling is it. Well, we already talked about that a little bit in Article 1. When they catch the ball with both feet on the floor, they pivot using either foot because it's not been established yet. Okay, both feet on the floor and the player lands. Okay, yep. Simultaneously, one foot is on the floor. That becomes your pivot foot, I believe. Yep. So anybody, so, okay, so traveling. So traveling. I think that, I can't remember if someone can help me out with the actual name of that move that we see a lot. And it's 50-50, especially if it's against a coach. They go, well, shoot, that's traveling.
Euro
And
step.
then,
Heroes.
Oh,
thank you.
the step through. Yeah. You're a step.
Yes. So let's just take a couple minutes and discuss that a little bit, because I think it's worth discussing. But that's just my opinion. Any thoughts on why it would be called traveling for some reason? Is there some indicators of when that is being conducted to even consider calling a travel on it? Or because it's a Euro step, then that means it can't be travel?
It's all as an official when you determine when that pivot foot is established.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what happens before that.
Exactly. Yep. So it's all about the pivot foot, which then reverts to that is the determination of traveling or not traveling. It is that simple.
And another
And
one,
it's judgment.
sorry, Phil.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go
That's
ahead, man.
really tough on the travel is the spin move. They go,
Yep.
they pick the ball up right, left, and then right again to finish your layup.
Mhm.
And I've seen refs call it very strictly and travel every time. And then if it's an athletic move, we just kind of let it go. So,
Right.
but it is all about the pivot foot. Yeah.
Yeah, by
And for
rule,
me,
we could call a travel like every time on a spin move, but we want
correct.
that play in the
Yep.
game. We want athletic moves in the game, so we need to try not to call it if we can, and be consistent throughout the whole game for both teams. Unless the
My
game needs it.
easy out on a spin move to call traveling is when their athletic move becomes a stutter step because they're not balanced.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that for me is my okay, hey, thank you. Now I can call that. Right. So,
Feel like I
but,
felt a little. Yeah.
yep. So anyway,
So guys, for
anything
me,
else?
for traveling,
The other thing
this is
is,
probably the most misapplied, miscalled violation foul that we have.
Yeah.
We call traveling a lot when it isn't, and we don't call it when it should be.
Right.
And again, if we officiate the defense and we will only pick up the obvious travels if we officiate the defense. We don't want to guess on travels. Travel's got to be at 100%. It is a travel. If we think it's a travel, we guess it's a travel, we don't call it.
Do you guys have any tips for picking up the ones where like they're getting the ball and then they're doing it, like when they're receiving the pass and they're not dribbling? Because that's the one that I always find the hardest. If you
So
know what.
Zachariah, I'm just telling you, just
Mhm.
call the obvious
All right.
travels. Again,
Okay.
if we start nitpicking and starting calling all kinds of travels, again, I got bit in the ass about 15, 17 years ago where I started calling travel really tight in the game. It was a
Yeah.
playoff game. And next thing you know, the fans start calling travel.
Mm,
And it just bit me in the ass.
all right.
And the point I'm making is after that, I just call the obvious ones, and nobody ever complains about traveling.
Okay.
And George, did you have something for us?
oh, no, I was going to admit sometimes that when they do the step back, they're doing that a lot now to shoot. You got to watch the feet then too.
Yep.
But like Neil
Yep.
said, it's got to be pretty, 100%.
Yep. Obvious.
So George, what you're talking about is they catch the ball on one side of the 3-point line, and without dribbling, they go to the other side, right?
No, I mean they're guarded, and like the NBA guys do, they do this step back to shoot,
Right.
and so a lot of this is mostly the boys' basketball. Girls don't do it very often, but the boys, they'll be guarded and they'll pick up the dribble, and they may be at the 15 feet out, and they'll step back and shoot over the defender.
You know, Georgie, what's tough is when you brought in the NBA.
Yeah, there you go.
I mean, they travel all the time. It depends on who travels. LeBron and Michael Jordan could travel all they
Right.
wanted.
Well, even in the college game, it's
Yeah. Just
Yeah.
call the obvious.
And yep, so Arrow highlighted if they try to get up basically and stand, that's pretty, because once they're on the floor, it's kind of like that is their pivot. It's kind of like their butt, if you want to say. When they start rolling and moving around and trying to gain that advantage to get rid of the ball, that's when that violation would definitely occur for traveling. Right. All right. Anything else on traveling? And then we'll move to verticality. So for me, verticality, there is a couple of points that I always roll through my mind. First of all, my opinion, this association does really good on verticality. Some people might not agree with me, but I'm telling you, I feel at least almost all the games that I did last year, we were as a crew verticality strong. We officiated the defense. A lot of things, a common thing that happens in the verticality world where we don't call it verticality and we call a foul on the defensive player is when the person goes up and that B1 jumps straight up, but A1 creates the contact and kind of makes that contact there in the abdomen area, which then brings down the arms of B1 just because of the contact by A1. A1 caused that to happen. And there can be a discussion on this. I have verticality on that. When I know that B1 did not bring down those arms on their own to do anything, it's obvious with that play and seeing whenever I call it the hammer of Thor, when someone tries to come down with their arms to either block, it's a whole different look. And it's very duplicable, meaning that you can definitely tell the difference between the two. So any
Right.
discussion on that? Yeah, go ahead.
It makes sense, kind of like you're saying. If it's in the chest, then they're obviously upright. But if it's like on their shoulder, then they're out of position, sort of thing.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And another point on verticality, I call it fool the referee play. The person's completely vertical, but then they step into the player. Now that's kind of the opposite there, right? Where I was talking about the offensive player creating the contact. Now the defensive player is moving and taking that step while having their hands straight up. That is a foul. That is, they're trying to fool you. And yeah, so anyway. Any comments? Any discussions?
Yeah. When you person jumps up in the air, natural
Yep.
is for the arms to go a little bit forward. Because it's not, our bodies aren't built to go straight up. It's kind of strange, but to be kind of have your arms just slightly ahead of you. And I've seen guys call a foul because it was a little bit of a touch. And I say, well, no, because it's just natural that when you jump up in the air, your arms are not going to straight up in the air. And I remember going to a camp for college guys, and that's one thing they stressed is that when a person goes up, their arms are going to naturally go forward just a little bit.
Okay. Yeah. Yep. Yep. That's definitely out there in that basketball world. All right. Anything on verticality? Anything else? Any more comments or questions?
No, cover delays real quick, and then let's
Okay.
try and wrap it up here in the next couple
All
minutes.
right. So, a warning for a team for a delay is administrative procedure for an official, which is recorded in the scorebook for the score and reported to the head coach. So that could be a made basket and A1 taps the ball, meaning, so they just tap the ball kind of away and that's kind of the motion to allow A to get back. And that would be a time where you could just, hey man, just leave the ball alone, okay? Which is what I normally do. And then from that point, if it's kind of like maybe the end of the game or something, I don't know. Any thoughts on that when it comes to talking and or just blowing your whistle and recording it in the book?
I think Errol probably has some good insights on this one.
Okay.
And he
There
served
are-
you right up the creek.
Last year I had a game out at Battleground, Camas at Battleground, the JV boys, and one of my partners verbally warned somebody about a delay at not giving them the ball after a timeout, but didn't put it in the book. I thought they'd put it in the book, and then like a couple of quarters later, there was water all over the floor in front of their bench. So I assumed it was the second delay. I'm like, okay, well that's the second delay. We got to do a technical foul. Went over there and explained it to my partner, and he's like, okay. And then it was the third partner that I thought called the first delay, but there was no first delay. So anyway, 2 delays before a technical foul need to be called.
Wow.
One of
All
them
right.
was for not having the floor ready for play. So if they, in this case, if they spill water on the floor and it's taking more than a minute or so to clean it up, it's only a delay unless it's their second delay.
Makes sense.
Gotcha. Yeah. And can't we now call report a delay a game warning to the book if a common foul is called? So now play is stopped, and we'll say it's an off-ball illegal screen, and A1 decides, you know what? I want to shoot this. I want to shoot.
Yeah, that's Article 5.
I'm just going to
That's a
shoot
new
it
one.
for the heck of it.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
a new one.
Okay. All right. Anyway, so that's just that.
Okay, so
That is
we could spend an hour on section 49, 48 real quick. Phil, go for it. This is just warning a coach for team conduct, like a bench warning or a coach warning.
yes. That is the best little tool that we have in our toolbox. Instead of just giving them a technical foul, we can give them a direct warning. I think that is what we're talking about, right?
Can we
yes.
give a player a warning?
Can we give bench personnel a warning?
No, a player on the court. Can we give him a warning? Can we blow the whistle, stop and say, hey, that's a warning?
Negative, we cannot.
I've seen it happen multiple
but it's not
times.
an official warning.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
can, but
official
we can't
wording.
put it in the book.
Right.
Yeah.
There you go.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
a great tool, game management, when you go over to the coach and say, hey, I've warned number 12 about
Yep.
his attitude.
Right.
And generally the coach takes care of it. But it's not an official warning.
Yeah.
Right.
Had some fun conversations now. Okay, Phil, we spent an hour on this one, an hour or two on faking being fouled. Can you summarize faking being fouled in 30 seconds?
Faking being fouled in 30 seconds. Okay. Here's my summary of faking foul in 30 seconds. So basically, we know if A fakes, we should just call it dead. If the ball, and 9 times out of 10, the ball might be in the air, we're supposed to call it dead. At that point, then we go to the AP because now it's a loose ball. When it comes to B faking a foul, we are supposed to kind of wait for that inner. So I had one at Skyview. Kid flopped on a layup. It was a bang bang. As soon as the ball went in, I blew my whistle and I gave the signal of flopping or faking a foul. It was that quick. It might not be that quick. It might, if that was a missed basket or something, then if there was a fast break going on, maybe like you don't call it at that time. So that's my 30-second, Errol.
Yeah, we want to be careful here. We want to call the obvious, which means it's not just exaggerated, it's theatrical or exaggerated. And it's not just embellishing, it's overtly embellishing. So it needs to be extremely obvious where there can't really be any doubt if you're going to call this sort of thing. If there's contact, we want to look to call a block, right? If there's no contact, if he's not overtly embellishing, maybe give him a quick verbal on it. But we want to call this seldom, but it's here in the book as a tool we can use if and when we need it.
And this is to show that we're not going to tolerate for players to embellish in faking, whatever, to show us up. And that is exactly what that is. But that's just my opinion, but it's probably almost the truth. So, because once that flopping came into the book, now we have that tool to use by saying, hey, you know what? We don't want this in our game. So,
yeah, we've always had it as a penalty. It's just that we have an extra tool instead of going straight to a technical foul.
Right. Yep.
Sets the tone sort of thing. Like, hey, we're calling it.
And it's two separate, faking and delay game, right? So it's two separate things. So.
Yeah. Any other comments on this part or any other topic that we've talked about tonight, you guys? Wonderful. My battery.
Thanks everyone for joining. I hope this really was beneficial to
Thank you, Phil, for doing this.
Yes, I was definitely a little late, so I apologize on that. I'm in Arkansas this week. And yeah.